Hi everyone, and welcome to Psyched with Setmire. What we'll do in this little lecture presentation is we're going to look at the different personality theories of psychology. And there are really 8 major approaches, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the big names and concepts within each one of them, as they all take their own little viewpoint or perspective on how we can explain your personality. What has made you the person that you are today? So let's look at these, and again, we'll just go over some of the kind of key stuff in each one of them. The first big theory is the psychodynamic perspective. And a little quick analogy here, humans are unconsciously motivated beings seeking to fulfill and balance our sexual and aggressive urges. And the really big name that you would associate with the psychodynamic approach is Sigmund Freud, who you can see holding a cigar right here. If there's a psychologist who's holding a cigar, it's probably Freud, very well known for that. He's also well known for his ideas about the unconscious mind, that all of our behavior is based on unconscious instincts and early childhood experiences, things that we typically are not normally aware of. And his theory, he called it psychoanalysis, the theory of personality, and also his form of therapy that he invented, again, really focusing on early childhood influences and ideas related to the unconscious mind and the libido and a few of the other things that you see on this graphic. So he talked a little bit about the 3 different structures of personality, the id, the ego, and the superego, represented really nicely in this picture here, the id being kind of the primal, instinctive part of us, and the ego being the kind of reality principle or the great mediator, and then the superego being like our conscience or our ideals. And then he also talked about its 5 psychosexual stages of development, that as we age, we go through these different phases of our libido or our psychic energy being focused on different parts of the body. And Freud's theories are a little bit controversial, but he was the first, right? So he had to start somewhere, and really everybody who came after him has built on what he proposed. So coming after Freud, we had the Neo-Analytic Theories, or the new analysis is what Neo-Analytic refers to, where humans are unconscious and conscious actors and goal-oriented strivers. And everyone in this perspective really worked with Freud and broke off with him at some point. Freud didn't play very well with others. He didn't do well with people not accepting his ideas. And the first person here is a man named Carl Jung, and probably one of my favorite psychologists. Carl Jung looked a lot at things like the personal unconscious, our own unique repressed thoughts and forgotten experiences and undeveloped ideas. And also the collective unconscious, that there were thoughts and feelings and expectations and archetypes that were common to all members of a species. And so he kind of broke from Freud, looking a little bit more like spiritual and mystical rather than purely kind of sexual and aggressive. There are lots of other big names in this approach, but one other one that I'd like to mention is a developmental psychologist named Erik Erikson, who spent a lot of time proposing that we develop our personality over the entire lifespan, that we go through 8 different stages or 8 different kind of phases as we develop throughout life. And I have those 8 stages listed here for you, that we first learn to trust or mistrust the world, and then we develop autonomy versus shame and doubt, and initiative or guilt, industry versus inferiority. Entering the teen years, we're focused on our identity, or do we become kind of confused in who we are? Do we focus then on intimacy or become isolated in our young adult years? And then generativity versus stagnation, and toward the end of life, integrity versus despair. So a couple of different people here. Here are 2 of the really big ones. Other perspectives say that we are purely biological. The biological theory views us as a bundle of genes and brains and hormones, and focuses on things like DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, that main ingredient of our chromosomes and genes that forms the code for all of our genetic information. From a biological perspective, we are not born a blank slate. We're born with everything already in place, this idea of biological determinism, that an individual's personality is completely determined by biological factors, especially genetic ones from our genes, our chromosomes, our DNA. And the complete polar opposite of that, the behaviorist approach, says that we're intelligent rats learning life mazes. And behaviorists reject ideas like the conscious mind and genetics and internal motivations and traits and so on, and see us as just being in a product of our environment. This is purely the nurture side of the nature and nurture debate. Our personality, in other words, is completely learned. And a few big names here: John Locke, very famous for his idea of tabula rasa, or the blank slate, that we're born with everything blank and the environment will write in and fill in the pages for us. We had people like Ivan Pavlov, who we talked about back in the classical conditioning unit. John Watson, who was very famous for his experiments with little Albert or baby Albert. And then, of course, B.F. Skinner, who came up with his ideas of operant conditioning. So according to this perspective, everything that we are is learned and the product of our environment and the product of nurture. Yet another perspective comes in the cognitive personality theories, which say that humans are like little scientists and information processors. And cognitive psychologists view the perception of the environment and our thoughts, our cognitions, as the core of what it means to be a person. In other words, the essence of our personality is really found in the way that we think. And from this perspective, we're looking at people like Albert Bandura and cognitive social learning theories, where behavior is the product of the interaction of our thoughts and learning and past experiences in the environment. We're looking a lot at your expectations and your beliefs about your success, something that Bandura called self-efficacy, our expectation that your efforts will be successful. So basically here your personality is dictated by your expectations and perceptions in the way that you are viewing the world, kind of setting you up for what you're actually going to experience and what's important to you. The trait perspectives have a slightly different take on personality, a little bit different than the ones we've covered so far. Here, humans are clusters of temperaments and traits and skills. And when we're talking about a trait, we're just talking about a dimension or a characteristic in which people differ in a distinct way. It's basically an adjective. So if you were to describe yourself or describe a friend to someone else, the words that you use would be adjectives or traits. So here what we're trying to do is use a limited number of adjectives or dimensions to describe and scale individuals. And there have been an incredible number of kind of perspectives within this, but the one that really has the biggest amount of strength statistically and empirically is something known as the Big Five. 5 traits or basic dimensions that we can kind of boil somebody's personality down to. And these dimensions are conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and extroversion, which make a wonderful little acronym of CANOE. Right? So these 5 different traits, which break down into little endpoints or different facets or dimensions as well, we can capture somebody's personality. So the trait perspective is a little bit different in that rather than trying to figure out what has made you the person you are today, we're trying to describe the person that you are today, using things like the Big Five or the Big Three and several other different theories that are all statistically driven through things like factor analysis. A few more humanistic and existentialist theories say that humans are free and responsible beings seeking fulfillment of our spirituality and our potentials, a very kind of positive, happy field of psychology, where we're looking at the fundamental goodness of people and striving toward higher levels of functioning. And a couple of big names here, we have people like Abraham Maslow, who talked about our hierarchy of needs and how we strive to become self-actualized and fulfill our potential, moving up the pyramid from kind of basic needs like physiological and safety stuff to more love and belonging, esteem, and eventually reaching the top and kind of fulfilling our potential as a human being. We also have people like Carl Rogers, who talked a lot about the idea of becoming a fully functioning person and having unconditional positive regard from somebody and of ourselves, right, in order to reach that fully functioning person status. Really, really big name in therapy and counseling psychology. But both of these people focusing quite a bit on our fundamental goodness and striving to realize our potential and fulfill our kind of destinies and potentials as a human being. The last one, kind of a combination of everything, the person situation approach or perspective, says that humans are an ongoing dialogue between ourselves and the environment. So it looks directly at how different social situations might impact behavior. And this is very much along the lines of social psychology, maybe even a little bit of sociology, because we look at the power of the situation. So from this approach, we say that personality might be kind of a poor predictor of our behavior, because sometimes a situation can be so strong that it overrides our natural inclinations. And we talked about this with survival instincts, right? But sometimes a situation can bring out parts of us that might not normally emerge. Again, very along the lines of social psychology. You might be different with your friends than you are with your family, and different with your family than you are with your partner, and different with your partner than you might be like in a classroom. That different situations bring out different parts of your personality. And this approach also focuses quite a bit on the lifespan. Because we don't stop growing and changing and responding to the environment, we have to study an individual as they change over time. So we're kind of looking at an interaction of a lot of different elements within this kind of final theory. So those are the different perspectives when it comes to explaining our personality, and there's obviously quite a bit more that we could have covered, but just to give you kind of a little bit of a rundown of how each one of those branches or fields or theories kind of view our personality. And most likely, as it is with just about everything in psychology, our personality is the product of a variety of things coming together. So it's probably a little bit of our unconscious mind mixed with some genetics, mixed with some behaviorism and all of our cognitions and expectations, and it happens across our lifespan, and there are all sorts of things that motivate us to reach our potential. It's a combination of everything. But looking at these different theories, hopefully you can start to see how we might view your personality right through the lens of personality psychology. So thanks for joining me, and I will hope to have you join me again in the near future.